serious to those whom this applies to. Why are you not afraid of death? Takes too much energy. Being afraid of a certainty. There's no reason for it. Depression really altered my mind into this mentality. I realize it is not a healthy way of thinking. I am not suicidal anymore. But I really don't care if I die. Say if I do, I wanna have college, work, taxes, you name it. I am going to die alone regardless, so it really does not matter to me. However, as long as I am alive, I'll make the most of it. I have video games, a loving family and a few really good friends. So I am hanging in there. Thank you kind stranger for the gold. When I was 18 I thought I would live forever. Now that I'm over 80 I'm afraid I will. Plagiarized, but the truth. My biggest fear now is that one of my children will die before I do, and every day it becomes more likely. For those that don't bother to read my history, I'm 81. No reason to fear the inevitable. I like the idea of finality. Everything must end, including me. Also, I feel like I have lived my life in a way I am satisfied. I may not be rich or successful, but I am nice to people. I know the people in my life love me, and that is all I could hope for. Being okay with death is the only way you can truly enjoy living. Death is hard to come to terms with, but it'll come eventually, and it is impossible to know when. This is exactly why we need to be more mindful about being present and just enjoy what we have around. Forgive yourself and enjoy the small things. I truly recommend reading Tuesdays with Maury. It gives very interesting points of view about death and how to embrace it. I am terrified of death, not for myself, but for how it will affect those around me. Death itself will be like going to bed after a long hard day. Seems cozy. What am I gonna do? Die. Might as well be okay with it, since it's the most inevitable event ever. I was in a state of non-existence for one eternity already, and I was born. One day I will go back to not existing for another eternity. I may as well make the time in between long and enjoyable. I find it fascinating that people are so afraid of death and can't comprehend no longer existing, especially when all of time before they were born was just like that. My dad and I went on a whitewater rafting trip to celebrate my acceptance to my first choice university. On day 3, we went sideways through a curler. Boat flipped, and my dad was launched from his seat while I was stuck inside. The second I hit the water I reflexively emptied my lungs. After struggling and failing to pull my way out from underneath, I accepted that I was going to die. Then I remembered that my dad was with me, and I knew that he would blame himself if I died. I had to fight the buoyancy of my life jacket, but I managed to swim under the gunnel and resurface on the other side. I spent the rest of the day in an existential crisis and came to the decision that I was going to justify my survival through my studies and eventually my career. After having faced death, I no longer fear it. In a sense, I'm playing with the house's money and I'm making the best of it. Death is a natural part of our existence. You can't do anything to prevent it, and sometimes it may come quite early and unexpectedly. And since I only get one life, I've decided to do whatever I want with it and enjoy the ride while it lasts. It'd be just like going to sleep for a long time. Perfect. I'm tired of this world. I'm not afraid of death itself, but I'm afraid of how I will die. I don't know if I'll just pass away, or if I'll get shot, or if I'll get a deadly disease. I think that we all die in the end, and I don't see a single reason why you should be afraid of death. I'm actually excited about what's gonna happen after I passed away, Mayo. Because death is a permanent solution to all my problems, I guess I don't see a point in worrying about it. It's going to happen, no matter what I do. There's life after death. I'm reasonably confident I've been pretty decent as a person. If there's nothing, I'm not really going to know any better. Am I? When I was a teen, I was diagnosed with epilepsy in the form of both grand mal and absent seizures. It took quite a while to get them under control, and my identity changed in the process. I grieved, both for the change in my future life and for the loss of who I had been. I came to terms with the changes. I've already seized in the shower and been hung in the loop of the shower head like a noose. I've already seized and fallen down a set of concrete steps and hit my head. I've seized and hit my head on a countertop and ripped my back open on a baseboard. I live with the possibility of dying every day. Death will come sooner or later. It's useless to fight it. I don't know the day or the minute. But when the time comes, I will greet death as a friend and hope my family doesn't grieve over much for me. Death gives meaning to life. If there was no deadline, there would be no reason to do anything. I'm not afraid of a natural conclusion. I'm more afraid of not making the most of the time I have. I look around and see the atrocities that go on in this world. I see how people die or are murdered, often brutally, for doing nothing. Babies, children, women, and men alike. All killed in the name of someone else's god or other beliefs. Often for no reason at all. Just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. How can death be so scary when it not only is inevitable, but it happens to people like that all the time? Not to mention the rest of the animal kingdom. Animals die in vast quantities we can't even comprehend. Some species even commit suicide as part of their natural life cycle. For one reason or another. There are just so many reasons to believe death is not such a big deal that I've decided to stop fearing it. I think the only reason we naturally fear it is because it's in our DNA. We are programmed to avoid it at all costs in the interest of propagating ourselves into the future. Evolution made us fear it. If it didn't, we wouldn't have made it this far, and by we, I mean all living things. Though, I have come to believe it's not a big deal. It simply can't be. No. The alternative, if it really is as scary as I used to think it was, is that we are living in a literal hell. The thing I actually do still fear is the method of my future death. I only hope that it won't be too drawn out or painful. While I'm alive, death doesn't matter. When I'm dead, I wouldn't care. There's too many fun and exciting things going on in life to be worried about what might happen when it's all over. I do try to be a good person though. Death is better than depression. It's inevitable. If there's no afterlife, I'll be dead and won't care. If there is, great. Either way, there's no sense in ruining whatever time I have left by worrying about it. I simply find the idea of eternity to be even more terrifying. I would rather die right now than be cursed with immortality. Again, I do fear that death is just eternal darkness. Deceived but unchanging. So I guess that's kinda whack as well. Being closer due to a suicide attempt. Everything turns dark and you know you're slipping away. But nothing can stop it. Then you wake up 2 weeks later in the ICU with no recollection on how you got there and how long you were sleeping. I don't believe in an afterlife. Expect it to be like unconsciousness. I am happy to live another while yet. I dread a horrible death or a life worse than death. Death itself. Not so much. I was diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago. It started off as wait and see before the lymph node in my neck grew to the size of a softball, and it was chemo. Now, I work as a medical malpractice attorney. Many of the plaintiffs I have deposed are dying from stage 4 cancer. Many die before we get to trial. For many people, I may be the last person that asks you questions about your entire life before you go back to family and friends and live your final days in peace. Meeting me may literally be the worst day of the rest of your life. I have seen many people staring in the face of death from cancer. Some are angry, some are sad, some are bitter, some are at peace. I always have to stay neutral and resist the urge to share any of their emotions. I don't want to argue with an angry cancer patient any more than I want to cry with a sad one. What I can say is that the people that have found peace with their diagnosis and still find time to joke and laugh at the deposition are my inspiration of who I want to be if I'm ever looking at death. So when I got my diagnosis, I was never scared. The first doctor that told me thought I was in shock at how mellow I was with the news. I think I just knew what to expect. I did the chemo, and I'm now 1 year post chemo and in remission 7 months with no evidence of disease. Fear of death never appealed to me. This is probably getting buried. But I had a meditational breakthrough one night, 6 years ago. Ascribe whatever significance you please. But since then, I never get bored. I can be at the DMV for 3 hours without my phone. Find observing the common DMV goer absolutely riveting. Don't know if this is a good thing. I lost the fear of death, not dying per se. Death by wood chipper is still terrifying. Before, death anxiety gripped me at least weekly, if not daily. After, as if parts of my brain just instantaneously rewired. No more anxiety about death. No more nightmares. dream very vividly, and I have done so for as long as I can remember. But I also had nightmares just as vivid. After, dreams are either mundane or euphoric. Edit. Come to think of it, existential fear and anxiety in general completely vanished. It's inexplicable as to why this happened. But if anyone's interested, I wouldn't mind sharing how I arrived at the breakthrough.